Imagine it's 1967. A left-handed guitarist with wild hair steps onto the stage in London, cradling a Stratocaster like it's alive. Within minutes, he bends the strings into wails, whispers, and screams that no one has ever heard before. That man, of course, was Jimi Hendrix, the artist who would forever change how we understand rock, blues, and the electric guitar. Hendrix is remembered as a once-in-a-generation genius, a figure who seemed to channel music from another dimension. Audiences thought he was untouchable, a supernatural force of creativity. But what most people don't realize is that Hendrix's brilliance wasn't created in isolation. Behind his innovation stood a lifetime of listening, studying, and absorbing the work of other musicians. He was as much a student as he was a pioneer. The truth is, Hendrix was obsessed with other artists. He carried their music inside him, dissecting every lyric, every chord, and every performance. Some of these musicians became his idols, some became rivals, and a few became personal friends whose influence shaped not only Hendrix's music, but also his philosophy of what art could achieve. Tonight, we peel back the curtain to uncover those hidden influences, from blues pioneers to British rockers, from soulful poets to flamboyant showmen. These are the figures who helped mold the greatest guitarist in history. Their sounds lived in his fingers, their lessons echoed in his feedback, and their spirit burned in every note he played.
7. Muddy Waters, the father of electric blues. Before Jimi Hendrix set the world ablaze with his electrifying sound, he was just another young guitarist searching for a voice in the smoky clubs of Nashville and Memphis. That voice revealed itself the moment he heard Muddy Waters. To Hendrix, Muddy wasn't just a bluesman. He was a force of nature who took the pain and poetry of the Mississippi Delta and plugged it into an amplifier. The result was raw, thunderous, and unforgettable. Hendrix once admitted that hearing Muddy Waters for the first time was like a spiritual awakening. He recalled being transfixed in the back of a club, watching Waters bend notes until they cried like human voices. It wasn't just music, it was testimony, emotion, and storytelling rolled into one. Muddy showed Hendrix that the electric guitar could do more than entertain. It could heal, mourn, protest, and shout with the urgency of life itself. In 1968, backstage at the Fillmore East, Muddy reportedly gave Hendrix a piece of advice that would stay with him forever. The electric guitar was meant to cry tears the acoustic guitar could never shed. Hendrix took that to heart. Every squeal of feedback, every dive bomb bend, every sustained note in songs like Red House and Machine Gun carried Waters' DNA. But Muddy's influence went deeper than sound. He embodied authenticity. He was unpolished, unapologetic, and absolutely himself, a model Hendrix followed throughout his career. Hendrix never tried to be the next Muddy Waters, but rather the first Jimi Hendrix, carrying forward that same honesty through his own psychedelic lens. Without Muddy Waters, Hendrix's fire might never have found its spark. He taught him that volume wasn't about noise, but about reaching places silence never could. In many ways, Muddy handed Hendrix the torch of the blues, and Hendrix set it ablaze for a new generation.
6. The Beatles' inspiration and rivalry. For Jimi Hendrix, the Beatles represented both admiration and competition. By the time Hendrix was still grinding through late-night bar gigs, the Beatles had already conquered the world with their catchy melodies, groundbreaking studio work, and charisma. They were living proof that music could transcend boundaries. Hendrix respected them, but he also felt the sting of comparison. The press often called him the Black Beatles, a label he despised. He wanted to be recognized on his own terms. The turning point came in June 1967, just 3 days after Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band was released. Hendrix stunned London audiences by opening his show with the album's title track, a bold move considering the record had just hit the shelves. Paul McCartney himself was in the crowd that night, watching as Hendrix transformed the carefully crafted studio masterpiece into a wild, raw, and electric spectacle. McCartney later admitted it was thrilling yet intimidating to see their work reimagined so boldly. This moment captured the duality of their relationship. On one hand, Hendrix admired the Beatles' songwriting genius. Their ability to push pop music into deeper, more experimental territories gave him permission to do the same with rock. He often dissected their chord progressions, harmonies, and production tricks, seeing them as tools he could twist into his own psychedelic language. On the other hand, Hendrix's fiery competitive spirit pushed him to outdo them. He wanted his guitar to sound bigger, braver, and freer than anything they could put on vinyl. What made this rivalry so productive was its mutual respect. While Hendrix sought to prove he wasn't overshadowed by their fame, the Beatles themselves admired him deeply. George Harrison and Paul McCartney both spoke of Hendrix's genius, acknowledging that his live performances went places even they could never imagine. Ultimately, the Beatles gave Hendrix both inspiration and a challenge. They reminded him that music could change the culture, and they pushed him to ensure his guitar became not just an instrument, but a revolution of its own.
5. Bob Dylan, The Power of Words. While Jimi Hendrix was busy reinventing the sound of the electric guitar, Bob Dylan was quietly reshaping the purpose of rock and roll. Before Dylan, Hendrix often viewed songs as vehicles for explosive guitar solos or raw blues expression. But hearing Dylan for the first time completely shifted his perspective. Dylan proved that lyrics could be just as powerful as sound, that words themselves could ignite revolutions. The turning point came when Hendrix listened to Like a Rolling Stone. In later interviews, Hendrix admitted the song made him feel like a musical caveman, as though Dylan had unlocked an entirely new dimension of storytelling. Dylan's ability to pack complex emotions, narratives, and social commentary into a few verses left Hendrix in awe. It wasn't just about rhythm or melody anymore. It was about truth. Dylan showed him that songs could carry messages about injustice, love, and the human condition without losing their edge. This influence became most evident in Hendrix's legendary version of All Along the Watchtower. When Dylan first heard Hendrix's cover, he openly praised it, even declaring it definitive. For Dylan to acknowledge another artist's reinterpretation with such reverence was rare, but he recognized that Hendrix had unlocked new layers of meaning in the song. The haunting guitar tones and urgent rhythms Hendrix infused into the track gave the lyrics a cosmic weight Dylan himself hadn't fully imagined. Inspired by Dylan, Hendrix began weaving more poetic and surreal imagery into his own writing. Songs like Purple Haze and Voodoo Child, Slight Return reflected a new lyrical ambition. They weren't just riffs and hooks anymore. They were vivid dreamscapes where the guitar and the words told the story together. Dylan had planted the seed that rock could be intellectual, emotional, and political all at once. Perhaps most importantly, Dylan taught Hendrix that vulnerability and honesty were forms of power. Just as Dylan's raspy, imperfect voice carried raw conviction, Hendrix realized his own songs didn't need polished lyrics, they needed truth. With Dylan's influence, Hendrix's music expanded from dazzling guitar displays into complete works of art that blended sound and story seamlessly.
4. Cream, rivalry with Eric Clapton and power trio inspiration. When Jimi Hendrix arrived in London in 1966, the band Cream was already shaking the foundations of rock. With Eric Clapton on guitar, Jack Bruce on bass, and Ginger Baker on drums, they weren't just a group, they were a musical earthquake. Their explosive sound and fearless improvisation immediately caught Hendrix's attention. For him, Cream represented the kind of raw, unfiltered energy he wanted to harness in his own music. The rivalry between Hendrix and Eric Clapton quickly became the stuff of legend. At a small London club, Hendrix famously asked to sit in with Cream during one of their sets. What followed was a jaw-dropping jam session. Hendrix unleashed a ferocious solo that left Clapton visibly shaken. Later, Clapton admitted to close friends that Hendrix's creativity and fire made him briefly question his own place as a guitarist. It wasn't hostility, though. It was mutual respect forged in the heat of competition. Hendrix thrived on that competitive energy. Watching Cream's chemistry taught him that a band didn't need a massive lineup to create a monumental sound. A power trio, when fueled by passion and virtuosity, could fill entire arenas with sound and emotion. This idea directly inspired the formation of the Jimi Hendrix Experience with Noel Redding and Mitch Mitchell. Like Cream, Hendrix's band became a tight, three-piece unit that thrived on improvisation, pushing each other to new heights on stage. Beyond inspiration, there was a deeper lesson in Hendrix's relationship with Cream. Clapton and his bandmates proved that technical mastery wasn't just about precision, it was about risk-taking, about leaping into the unknown and trusting your fellow musicians to catch you. Hendrix adopted this philosophy wholeheartedly, transforming his live performances into electrifying journeys where anything could happen. The Hendrix-Clapton dynamic also became symbolic of a broader shift in rock. Their friendly rivalry drove each of them to explore new sonic territories, expanding what audiences thought was possible with guitar, bass, and drums. Without Cream, Hendrix might not have embraced the bold improvisational freedom that defined his greatest performances. In the end, Hendrix didn't just admire Cream, he absorbed their ethos. He took their formula of raw power, improvisation, and chemistry, then elevated it to a cosmic level. It was proof that competition, when mixed with respect, could fuel some of the most iconic music ever created.
3. The Rolling Stones. Danger, rebellion, and performance energy. If the Beatles represented melody, charm, and commercial perfection, the Rolling Stones embodied the opposite: raw rebellion, grit, and danger. For Jimi Hendrix, that contrast was magnetic. He admired how the Stones lived unapologetically, embracing chaos and controversy while still delivering unforgettable music. They weren't just performers, they were provocateurs who blurred the line between art and anarchy. Hendrix's fascination with the Stones wasn't only about their music, but also about their attitude. When he first shared a bill with them in the late 1960s, he watched Mick Jagger stalk the stage like a predator. Jagger didn't just sing, he performed with his entire body, using movement, expression, and charisma to whip the audience into a frenzy. Hendrix later confided to bandmates that Jagger taught him something vital. Guitar solos could be electrifying, but to truly captivate an audience, you had to embody the music. That lesson shaped Hendrix's own stage persona, the wild spins, the flamboyant outfits, and the unrestrained physicality that made his shows legendary. Keith Richards, on the other hand, became Hendrix's quiet obsession. While most focused on Richards' swagger, Hendrix studied his rhythm guitar playing. Those gritty, open-tuned riffs on songs like Satisfaction and Jumping Jack Flash were deceptively simple, yet carried immense weight. Hendrix understood the genius of restraint, that sometimes fewer notes, played with conviction, could shake an audience more than the fastest solo. This insight added depth to Hendrix's own playing, balancing his fiery improvisations with soulful, understated rhythms. The Stones also influenced Hendrix on a personal level. Their willingness to flirt with disaster, living on the edge both professionally and privately, mirrored Hendrix's own struggles with fame, excess, and creative pressure. Yet for Hendrix, it wasn't about copying their lifestyle, it was about embracing authenticity. The Stones proved that rock didn't need polish to be powerful. It needed honesty, even if that honesty was messy, reckless, or controversial. Ultimately, the Rolling Stones showed Hendrix that rock and roll was more than music. It was theater, rebellion, and a statement of identity. They inspired him to push boundaries further, to take risks that others avoided, and to make every performance a dangerous, unforgettable experience. Without the Stones' example of fearless rebellion, Hendrix's own electrifying stagecraft might never have reached such iconic heights.
2. Little Richard, the explosive mentor and theatrical influence. Long before Jimi Hendrix became the face of psychedelic rock, he was a young guitarist cutting his teeth on the Chitlin circuit, backing some of the biggest names in rhythm and blues. Among those mentors, none left a deeper mark than the incomparable Little Richard. For Hendrix, working under Richard wasn't just a job, it was a baptism by fire into the world of showmanship, discipline, and sheer musical chaos. Little Richard was more than a singer. He was a force of nature. Every performance was an explosion of glitter, sweat, and uncontainable energy. Hendrix, playing guitar in Richard's band, had a front-row seat to the spectacle. He quickly realized that audiences didn't just want to hear songs, they wanted to witness transformation. Richard turned concerts into spiritual experiences, blending gospel fervor with rock rebellion. This lesson would follow Hendrix for the rest of his career. Music alone wasn't enough. The performance mattered just as much. But working with Little Richard wasn't easy. Richard demanded perfection while simultaneously encouraging wild, uninhibited energy. Band members described the atmosphere as both exhilarating and exhausting. Hendrix learned how to survive in high-pressure environments, delivering flawless guitar work while adapting to Richard's unpredictable on-stage antics. At times, the flamboyant star would cut the band mid-song or extend numbers into seemingly endless jams. Hendrix had to think fast, improvise, and match the energy of a performer who redefined spectacle. Yet beneath the chaos was genuine mentorship. Richard saw in Hendrix a spark too bright to be contained. He recognized the young guitarist's revolutionary potential and, in his own unconventional way, pushed him to embrace it. Richard's influence is obvious in Hendrix's later stage presence, the flamboyant clothes, the outrageous charisma, even the daring stunts like playing with his teeth or behind his back. These weren't gimmicks, they were extensions of the lessons he learned under Richard's watch. Most importantly, Richard showed Hendrix that music was about liberation. It was about freeing audiences from the ordinary and transporting them into a world where anything was possible. By blending outrageous showmanship with uncompromising talent, Richard gave Hendrix a model for what it meant to be unforgettable. Hendrix took that blueprint and built his own legend, one that would forever change rock and roll.
7. Muddy Waters, the father of electric blues. Before Jimi Hendrix set the world ablaze with his electrifying sound, he was just another young guitarist searching for a voice in the smoky clubs of Nashville and Memphis. That voice revealed itself the moment he heard Muddy Waters. To Hendrix, Muddy wasn't just a bluesman. He was a force of nature who took the pain and poetry of the Mississippi Delta and plugged it into an amplifier. The result was raw, thunderous, and unforgettable. Hendrix once admitted that hearing Muddy Waters for the first time was like a spiritual awakening. He recalled being transfixed in the back of a club, watching Waters bend notes until they cried like human voices. It wasn't just music, it was testimony, emotion, and storytelling rolled into one. Muddy showed Hendrix that the electric guitar could do more than entertain. It could heal, mourn, protest, and shout with the urgency of life itself. In 1968, backstage at the Fillmore East, Muddy reportedly gave Hendrix a piece of advice that would stay with him forever. The electric guitar was meant to cry tears the acoustic guitar could never shed. Hendrix took that to heart. Every squeal of feedback, every dive bomb bend, every sustained note in songs like Red House and Machine Gun carried Waters' DNA. But Muddy's influence went deeper than sound. He embodied authenticity. He was unpolished, unapologetic, and absolutely himself, a model Hendrix followed throughout his career. Hendrix never tried to be the next Muddy Waters, but rather the first Jimi Hendrix, carrying forward that same honesty through his own psychedelic lens. Without Muddy Waters, Hendrix's fire might never have found its spark. He taught him that volume wasn't about noise, but about reaching places silence never could. In many ways, Muddy handed Hendrix the torch of the blues, and Hendrix set it ablaze for a new generation.